That's where a lot of the Irish and St. Dominic's came from Spittle. My mother's people were from Mayo.
God help us.
Yeah, well, she was born here. Yeah.
Did you ever hear that one, Gerry? God help us? When somebody says Mayo, you say, God help us.
Oh, yeah.
You know the reason for that is that Mayo was the hardest hit by the famine.
Oh, yeah.
More people died in Mayo than any other county.
Really? No, I never knew that.
Galway was just second after that.
Yeah.
But you say Mayo, and then somebody in Ireland will say, God help us, thinking back.
Help many people starve to death.
What's going on?
She is going to make you look so good. She's setting up the little camera there.
Yeah.
And,
Well, should I have a jacket on?
no, very informal.
Really? All right.
Yeah, we're quite informal.
Yeah. Well, talking to Gerry, you think I needed a tuxedo?
Well, he has a professional reputation to uphold.
Right?
That's all right, so
Yeah.
do I.
You're retired and I'm almost retired.
Retarded.
Yeah, that's not politically correct these days, okay?
Gerry, I also would love it very much if you have favorite stories that maybe
Oh, he's got 1,000.
he has recorded and maybe he hasn't. But there's some family stories I'm sure that you really like, and maybe they've not been recorded, and it would be good to preserve them.
Yeah, of
So
course.
if you can think of some of those that
Yeah.
you might like.
You know, Michael, I say this in jest, but I'm not 68, I'm 86.
You're reversed.
Just the opposite, you know. If she was around here 20 years ago, maybe we... But my mind is gone.
Not entirely.
Look at this on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
You see where she is?
Mm-hmm.
She's protecting the old gym.
Well, if you knew Kim, you'd know that you needed to be protected.
Oh.
Yeah.
Now,
Gerry, did you know Kim from the center
I'm sure I saw you down there, but
at the Klada Awards?
yeah,
and others?
yeah.
She was front and center, you know,
Oh.
organizing.
yes.
Yeah.
We may not need a mic. I'm just
Okay.
gonna do just a quick audio test.
Right.
And
Underneath it,
is that what that is?
yeah. Him and Eddie Kelleher up there,
Uh-huh.
another Irish.
You know, Eddie?
Yes. Yeah. Did you hear that they were considering renaming the school the Kelleher?
Oh, I did not.
Do what?
They were considering renaming Catherine Macaulay after Sister Edward Mary.
Yeah.
So they were going to call it Kelleher Academy, I think,
Yeah.
or something. And the one they're working on now is the Girls. That seems such a strange name.
Yeah, I didn't think
You
it was
know,
very
they're
good.
twins, Michael.
Is that right? Sister Mary.
Yeah, Edward Mary. That's why she's Edward Mary.
What was her name growing up?
The same as Eddie. Oh, her name. Her
first
name. Let me see. Jeez, I can't think. But I know when she became a nun, she took his name,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and I think it was only she had two names. I think one of them was her own name.
So maybe it was Mary Kelleher. And
Yeah.
She took
See,
Edward
they
Mary.
were twins. Eddie and her were twins.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's going to seem strange to have Catherine Macaulay have a different name.
Isn't it gonna be strange? I'm sick. I get sick when I think of it. Really.
I didn't know why the sisters would have an objection to that. I mean, I know that she was the foundress and everything,
Oh, yeah.
but
I never heard.
Guess I get a pair of glasses. Yeah. Are those glasses right here?
Oh yeah.
I don't need I don't think I use a microphone. I think I'm just gonna take the audio.
See that blank right there?
Sent her out to Chicago to get her away from me.
it didn't work.
Well, I had the same problem as he had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Only he had stopped,
Yeah,
you know. But I was in my youth.
you were in your prime.
Yeah, I didn't. To be honest with you, mine came to an end after I got back from Chicago.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's so much of that in Irish families. In mine, it's rampant, and even in the current generations. So we understand. Kim, is everything working though?
All right, whenever you're ready.
Okay.
There you go. I never expected this.
I wonder if
Hello?
it's Video Manley.
How are you, David?
Redmond?
His brother.
I'm just fine, thank you.
You know, I was going to unplug that thing.
Oh,
And I think I will
yeah,
after
yes.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it, how that happened?
Thank God it started before she
Yes,
started.
I
Mike,
will.
come here. Just,
Yeah.
This is actually this is what the
Okay.
shot
All
looks
right,
like.
David.
Oh,
All right, kid.
Is that-
Bye-bye.
maybe up a
Is that
little
your
bit.
son?
What do you think?
No, that's David, my,
All right.
Brother.
huh?
Your brother.
No.
Oh, your
Because his
Yes,
hand gestures
I
are
have
wide,
friends.
Oh yeah. It's,
but
Well,
I
let's
can
get
do
him
something
brushed
like
over.
that.
Yeah, that's a little better, I think, don't you?
Yeah.
yeah, I like
Huh?
that.
I don't
the
want
color
this to
looks
ring.
good too.
Good.
Thank you
When
so much for
you're,
doing this.
You're very
Talking.
welcome.
Well,
Yeah, that's good.
that was an important phone call.
I bet it was. Your bridge partner.
Yes, it is. All right, Cassie.
Okay. You all set then, Kim?
Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. We're here today to do an interview with Gerry Conley Sr. Today is June 27th, 2016, and we're at Gerry Conley's home on Gleckler Road in Portland. Filming today is Kimberly Clark, and also here is Gerry Conley Jr. So, Gerry, I have a few questions for you. And I'd like to start with, what are your connections to Ireland?
My connections to Ireland is that my parents had, their parents came from Ireland to Portland, and as we never heard anything about Ireland from my parents, either my father or my mother, and his family came from Ireland too. They were all, my mother and father were both born in this country, but years and years and years later, I made a trip to Ireland. I never thought I'd ever get there. I never thought I'd ever go in there, but met Ed Kelleher along the lines up in Augusta, and before you know it, we were over in Ireland, and I went 20 odd times after that. So.
Were you ever able to trace back the town that your grandparents came from?
I knew, yes, my dad's people came from Spittle, both of them. My mother's people came from County Mayo, and the heck was the other one? He came from Mayo, and I'm trying to think of where my grandmother came. I'll think of it as we go along.
Your grandparents on your father's side
We're Spittle,
were Spittle,
both of them.
and Connelly was one of the names.
Conley.
And what?
No, not Connelly. Conley. They never spelled it right. It was Connelly. That's what we were.
Oh,
See, Connelly, and they screwed it up and made it Conley. But it was Connolly, Connelly, Connelly. It was everywhere you wanted to spell it. But over here, it was Conley. Yeah.
I've heard so many different versions. One
That's
time,
true.
Cornelia.
Well, there you go.
That was. What was your impression of Spittle the first time you laid eyes on Spittle?
Well, the first time I laid my eyes on Ireland,
What impression did it make on you?
it was the old country, and I didn't expect anything different. I liked it. I was only there a short time, and it reminded me of someplace up in the northern part of Maine. To be honest with you,
Well,
I just thought Ireland and Maine had a lot together. That there's many things that you could compare, and I always found it that way.
When you were in Ireland, were you ever able to find any of your relatives?
Oh no, they were long gone.
Long gone.
Yeah, my both sides. Yeah, and it's strange. When we were kids, being brought up, never heard anything about Ireland. From my grandparents on my mother's side, or from my grandparents on my dad's side. My father's side, they weren't alive too long when I was a kid, but I remember them as grandparents. But I can't remember any conversations we had.
So did you ever witness them speaking Irish
No.
language?
No, and I don't. My parents, neither one ever spoke Irish, and I know my father's people did, but like I say, they weren't around very long when I was after I was born. My mother's people, her dad died very shortly after I was born, maybe a couple of years. His name was Patrick, a good Protestant name, and my grandmother's name was Bridget, and that was the name I found in Ireland.
What about in Portland? Did you hear the Irish language being spoken by Irish people here in Portland?
No, let me say this. If you were incorporated down at St. Dominic's, it was fluent back when I was a kid. People spoke the language all the time. But it went from one generation out the window. That was the end of it. And we never had it. And in fact, my parents never spoke of Ireland because their parents never spoke of Ireland. They were happy to leave Ireland and get here, and they didn't want to know anything about or talk about anything about what they left. But it wasn't nice. It was not nice. So anyway.
So you're suggesting that they didn't leave Ireland because they wanted to, they left because they had to?
Absolutely. They've heard of America and a land of the free and the home of the whatever. And they came here. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about the neighborhood that you grew up in Portland, and what was the west end of Portland and St. Dominic's Parish like for you?
Well, I didn't hit St. Dominic's. I really originated in St. Pat's. We were out on Powson Street and Mitten Street. Maybe I know my mother and father originally lived on, when they were married, originally lived on Douglas Street, and the town dump was right there on Douglas Street, so we were dump rangers.
There were other dump ranges up on the base of Montjoy.
Up on Bayside, that's right.
Don McWilliams used to talk about that.
Oh yes, Don McWilliams, very much. Don was well versed on the Irish in Portland.
So how old were you approximately when you moved to the west end of Portland?
When you say the West End,
The St. Dominic's Parish.
oh, I was married then. We were brought up from the West End. We moved to Atlantic Street, and my grandmother on my mother's side owned a 3-flatter, and we lived on the first floor, and a family by the name of Smith lived on the second floor, and my grandparents lived on the third floor. And we were only there a short time because I recall after we left Atlantic Street, we moved to Payson Street, and we were lived right next to Nathan Clifford's school, which was on the corner of Falmouth Street and Payson Street and Dean Street. And our house was situated right on the wall of the schoolyard. And the kids used to play baseball out there. Many a baseball came through my bedroom window. Yeah.
Did you ever think of how your life might have been different if you had stayed up on Atlantic Street rather than moving to the West End? Because everybody identifies you with the St. Dominic's Parish.
Well, we didn't move off the Montjoy Hill, and I hate to say this, but in my day we called it Manju Hill, because it was mostly Irish and Jewish people on Montjoy Hill. And you had to come down the hill, and then you ran into the Italians. See, and the Italians spread out Washington Ave, and just a little way up Montjoy Hill. And they were down in back too, down toward Commercial Street.
Do you remember your feelings when you moved to St. Dominic's Parish, and what street did you move to?
We didn't move to St. Dominic. We moved to Sacred Heart. We were high and mighty, you see, the upper level, right in Nathan Clifford's schoolyard. We used to go over to Sacred Heart. My mother, God bless her, she used to go to Mass 7 days a week. And rain or shine, she never. And she walked. And there was a fellow by the name of Sumner Bernstein, Eli Bernstein. It was Eddie Bernstein's father, who was a fisherman. And he used to drive his pickup truck down to the waterfront every morning, and he'd pick my mother up and give her a ride to Sacred Heart and drop her off in front of Sacred Heart, and then he'd go to the waterfront. That was Eddie's dad. So, what were you asking about it?
Do you think that that was his good deed for the day?
He did it. He did it all the time. He was a wonderful, wonderful man.
I suppose you could tell some funny stories about Eddie Bernstein.
Oh my God! Eddie and I were. Eddie and I really, he was about 6 or 7 years older than I, and he went to Darren High School. I remember him going to Darren High School with his brother and his sister, but Eddie and I were never, the only thing that Eddie and I ever had in common was when I became an adult, I was a chairman of the Democratic City Committee, and Eddie was chairman of the Republican City Committee, and so that's how we got to know each other.
Did you ever hear of the fact that Eddie Bernstein, when he was the city councilor, had a fan club on Cape Cod?
I think what they're doing is they're getting Pop Sakarian mixed up. Pop Sakarian was the guy who had the fan club down on Cape Cod. And because Popkins was crazier than I can't use the word, but Popkins was wonderful for about 5 minutes, but after 25 minutes, you were waiting for a bomb to come in and put us all to sleep.
How many times did he run for city council before he was elected?
Oh my Lord, I don't recall Michael, but it was numerous times. Many times he ran. And I can't recall, I can't remember whether he came on the council after me. I think he did. I think it was after me. He still had a couple of more dry runs before he made it. Yeah.
I'm trying really hard, Gerry, to get you to the St. Dominic's Parish, but you're making it difficult for me.
I know it. And that was because we were in St. Pat's originally, and then we moved to my grandmother's house up on Atlantic Street, and like I say, we were on the first floor, and the Smiths were on the second floor, and the Murphys were on the third. And why I tell you that is because the Smiths had a nice family, and they were cooking one after Sunday, noontime. And we used to, you remember in the old days, you used to have a kerosene stove with a can feeding it, you know. They had a big fire. And baby burnt to death. And my dad was home from work, and he shimmied up on the back porch, up onto the second floor, and he kicked the kitchen door in, went for the baby, and when he got inside, he got burnt. They took him to the hospital. And that's how, and the little baby died in that fire. And that's how we moved out of Munjoy Hill to Payson Street. But my brother Dick and I, you know Billy Downs? Have you ever heard of Billy Downs?
No, I haven't.
Well, Gerry can tell you about it. But anyway, we were moved in with the Downses, my brother Dick and I, and there was, I think, there's Tommy, my brother Tom, my sister Jean, and I think that was it when we were on Munjoy Hill, we had the fire, like I said. And we ended up living with Billy Downs until my parents were able to find a place, and we ended up on Payson Street in Sacred Heart Parish.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, after you were married, you eventually moved into St. Dominic's Parish.
You're trying to get to me there, huh? Well, we were married in Chicago, and we had our first child, Gerry, there, and then Ann was pregnant with Dick, and she said to me, Gerry, I'd like to get back to Portland. And I love to tell everything. My problem of drinking was still with me. I used to work every day, but I used to drink right after work. And I'd come home generally cupped up, go to bed. Same thing over the next day. Anyway, but she says to me one day, this is right after she was pregnant with Dick, and she says, I'm planning on going back to Portland, she said. Now, she says, you can do what you want. You can stay here, or you can come with me. And I said, I'm with you, babe. That's what the title of that song came from. I'm with you, babe. And we came back to Portland. And that's when we hit St. Dom's. Right on, do you remember? That was the name of the bar on Spring Street.
Slane's.
Huh?
Slane's.
Slane's Bar.
Slane's. Slane's.
Cassie. I'm gonna take her out.
Good idea, Dan.
Hi, how are you?
Hello.
How are you?
Hi there.
And I'm going to work for Jake for a few hours.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's
I
wonderful.
wish I could say the same.
Yeah. What were you saying?
About Slane's, the bar on
Slane,
Spring Street.
that's where we lived first, right next to Slane's. And
Was that a good idea?
well, I talked to him and asked him if he could run the pipe over. There's only one house between us. But then we moved from there out to St. Pat's, out on Francis Street. And we were on Francis Street for, I know my daughter Janie was born then, but Tommy was born on Taylor Street, or Clark Street, what was it, Clark? One of them. But we went out to Taylor Street, came in town, and then I can't remember whether we went from Clark to Taylor Street, and then from Taylor Street to not Taylor Street.
Once you arrived on Taylor Street, did you have a feeling that that would be the place that you wanted to stay?
Oh, I thought that was a gift. That was a gift. Every time what's his, Tom Valot? He used to work for the
Planning department, was it?
no, Portland Renewal. What was it, Gerry?
Planning department.
Huh?
He was the head of planning.
Head of planning, yeah. And he's the guy that found Taylor Street. And because they'd already, there was an Irish family up there that wanted to buy the house for investments. And Tom was able to convince this other guy to go a little higher on the price and he'd get it. And he got it, and then they rented it to Ann and I when we had the children. That was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Now, when you were living up in St. Dominic's Parish, there were a lot of what we would call characters. Who were some of the characters that
Oh,
you
gee.
remember the best?
I listen. My mind is not what it used to be, but there were literally just dozens of them. There weren't one or two. There were dozens of them, and I can't. You brought the names up. I could tell you and probably tell you a story about them.
Tell us a little bit about Eddie Murphy.
Eddie Murphy. The name is familiar, but I can't place him.
Gerry, would there be some others that he would be familiar
You
with?
remember Eddie had a big pot belly and he big tall Irishman from Tate Street. He used to bring you down to the St. Patrick's Day parade every year.
And they named that little park after him where they do the
Yeah.
flag raising.
Yeah.
About him.
Yeah, but I can't, I tell you, not 68, I'm 86.
What about Phil Jenkins?
Phil Jenkins was he was, I knew him well, and he was very dangerous. There were more stories around about Phil Jenkins. And you don't know whether there was going to be a fire down there on Tate Street or Sting Street. And it was crazy. It was really, really crazy.
I do have one person that I'd like to ask you about, and tell us a little bit about Larry Connelly and how you first got to meet Larry Connelly and the kind of things that you worked with together with Larry.
Well, Larry belonged to the citizens group, civic-minded group, and always trying to improve the life of those that hadn't quite got off the bottom ladder. And he worked night and day, but he he belonged to a group that was just as active, but I would call Larry the spokesman. There was another fellow, and I can't think of his name right now.
Jim Oliver?
Jim Oliver was one, but there was another guy.
Pierre?
Who?
Pierre Chabanel?
Chabanel?
Pierre, yeah. And believe me, Larry Conley was an activist, but they had 3 or 4 others, and they were a solid group, and they were before the city council all the time, always trying to improve that. Like when Portland became a model city, they couldn't have picked a better spot in Portland than to pick that location that they came down with, because it worked miracles for an awful lot of people that needed help.
Do you remember the fight to try to preserve the People's Building?
Oh sure, oh sure. They never had any problem with me. I was one of the bomb tossers for them. Oh no, I always. In fact, Larry's crowd admired me. Be honest with you, they thought the world of me. And Tom, what was his name? Jim Oliver, and there were a number of them. And I used to go to some of their neighborhood meetings that they had. But they always knew that when they came to the city council, they were always pleased to recognize Councilor Conley. You know.
Well, I think that they did a lot for the West End, and you did a lot for the West End. So the West End was very lucky to have people active in politics that were looking out for them.
Well, they were the motivators, and they had to have somebody to go. And I'll tell you, they came to me. But, well, it was my district. You know. And they came to me quite frequently. And I did a lot.
Both of those things were needed then, weren't they? Somebody, yes.
Well, don't forget, Johnson, God bless Johnson, they had model cities all over the country. And there were only 2 in Maine, one in Lewiston and one in Portland. And I'll never forget, I'm trying to think of who was the congresswoman, Republican. The city council in Portland was going to interfere with the model city group that was appointed. The first committee, model cities, the chairman lived on the corner of Spring Street and what's the street that goes down?
Emory, maybe?
Emory. And Harold Loring was the mayor of the city at the time, and he named the committee for housing, and the guy made chairman was right on the corner of Emory and
Spring?
Huh?
Was it Spring?
Spring.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember that family, Gerry?
Nowak?
No way. Yeah. He named him chairman of the committee. And I was on the committee. The day we met, the evening we met, he resigned. And so it was under the council's hand at that time. And so the housing committee then elected a new chairman, and I was the chairman elected me as chairman.
You stepped into the fray.
I got right in. Well, the hell was I? I was in the legislature at the time. That's what brought me on board. Yeah.
I've got a few questions about the legislature, but I thought this might be a good time to ask Gerry Jr. if he has some stories that are family stories or things that he might like to have you talk about a little bit. So maybe Gerry has one or two questions for you.
Well, you see, I'm glad you invited me to come here, Michael. I told him you really only had a couple of questions about the George Mitchell appointment. So you've expanded this into a little bit more about the Gerard P. Conley Senior Show, or as he likes to say, Gerard P. Conley Senile Show. But I would say a few things, just because listening to him talk, I've been around him, needless to say, my whole life. And as Kim will find out afterwards when she takes some pictures, you know, a family of 13 was large even by West End standards. And so we did grow up on Clark and Taylor Street, but we did start out on Francis Street in the St. Patrick's Parish. Now, why I bring that up and why it's important is he referenced putting down the bottle, but he probably put the bottle down some 4 years ago. And he put the bottle down, but he picked up politics, all right? So he replaced the bottle with another obsession. And so he started running for office, and I remember this as little Irish children. There were 3-4 of us maybe out in this flat in St. Patrick's Parish after he returned from Chicago. And the first office he ran for was in 1960. He ran for sheriff, all right, of Cumberland County. And he ran against 3 politicos. And his mantra at the time was, and you have to picture this because you and I were children at this time, was, "The day of the cigar chomping sheriffs are over." All right, and he's sitting here at a debate with 3 Democratic guys and him who are running for the nomination, and they're all smoking cigars in this smoke-filled room. And so he, through his, of course, he was very active in AA, and people would go around the 26 towns of the county, and they'd say, in those days, the way you ran for office was you had a big box on the top of your car, right, which said Conley for sheriff. I still remember as a car. Here we are, soon to be sometime 13 children, and he had a Volkswagen, all right, one of the first bugs that ever came out. He had one on him, and then there was one on 2 or 3 other cars. Well, they'd say he was everywhere in the county, right, and he was running for office, and he won that nomination. He won. He got slaughtered by the Republican because it was the year of Nixon. But a story, and this will never ever be known to anybody because nobody took pictures at the time, but John F. Kennedy came to town when he was on the ballot in 1960, so he was 59. And he got into the press car and he had the cameras. And so right there where the TV station is on the corner, 6 nowadays, that's where Kennedy held his press conference, and he got in there. And everybody's running around getting sandwiches after the interview with Kennedy, and he's sitting with Kennedy by himself and one other guy. And he says, "Senator, if there was any way that we could help you to win this election, I don't care if I lose myself, we would love to see you become president of the United States." So that's always been a family story from his very first race. And that was the first of many, many races. He lost. He ran again in 62. He lost for sheriff. You imagine him with a gun? Scare anybody. And then finally in 64 is when he ran for the state legislature. And back then it was the big box. And you have all these names of people. And he came in first in the Democratic primary. All right? So that was the very beginning.
Out of 18.
Wow.
18 in the primary.
So he went to the legislature in 64, And Joe Brennan ran in 64, and John Martin ran in 64. And that was the beginning of that triumvirate, which really carried on Maine politics for the next 25 years as three very prominent people in the Democratic Party. 68, he ran for the state Senate, all right, and nobody could touch him. In 1970, Joe wanted to become governor. So Joe Brennan talked Ron Kellum, who was in the state Senate, to switch seats. Joe was the DA at the time. Joe thought he'd have a much easier time becoming governor if he was in the Senate. He was supposed to become the minority leader in the Senate for the Democrats, but he stepped aside so that Joe could be the minority leader. And then what happened then was, Joe ran for governor in 74. He remained in the Senate. We never knew he was our father. He was everywhere with Joe Brennan. All right, he went from one end of the state to the other with Joe, and they became incredibly close friends. And Joe lost that race, but still did an incredibly great job against George Mitchell. And George lost to Longley in 74, and George was so devastated that he never kind of realized that, oh my God, the Democrats have control of the legislature. Maybe I could become Attorney General. Too late. He and Peter Danton already had the Attorney General's job sewed up for Joe. Totally sewed up. So, Joe becomes Attorney General. Joe runs again in 78, and a tremendous primary between Phil Merrill, who was friends with him. They were in the Senate together, and Joe. But he ran around the state again with Joe. Joe beat Phil. Then Joe beat Lynn Palmer and became governor. And of course, he's in the Senate, and he does not become Senate president until 82. And in 82, he becomes the Senate president. And so after 14 years in the Senate, he gets to the peak of glory for the Senate and says, I'm resigning at the end of this term. All that work to get the power, and he never really had that much interest in it. So, I thought you were going to ask him about the U.S. Senate race, the U.S. Senate appointment, and he may have told you before. There were so many people who were after that job. Ken Curtis, right, was after the job. Harold Pacious was after the job. Bill Hathaway was after the job, as my father said. 200,000 people just told him no. Well, how could he get the job for U.S. Senate? And, even Ken Curtis wanted the appointment. So Joe had a lot of pressure on him, and of course, Joe came to him and said, geez, who should I pick out of these guys? And he says, well, what about me?
Other than me. I thought I read in the paper where you weren't interested. I says, that was for the papers. I'm talking to you.
Now, you're still very close with Joe, and you talk to him on a fairly regular basis?
Oh, yeah. We have lunch quite often.
Now, looking at it in retrospect, these many years later, and thinking about the things that George Mitchell was able to do for Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
What's your assessment now of the choice that Joe Brennan made of George Mitchell to be the senator? Was it a very influential choice, and especially having to do with Northern Ireland?
Well, I have never ever had a bad word to say about George Mitchell. I've always praised him. I recall that there was one time that George and Joe and I were going down to, I can't remember whether it was a Celtics game. I think it was a Celtics game. And the three of us were in the governor's car together, going to Boston. And a little disappointed in George. I never disliked him. He got elected to be the, what was it?
Majority leader?
Something in that line, and I said to him, he was with Teddy Kennedy and that group, you know, and I says, how come you didn't vote against that tax bill? And I really was out of line. I never should have said that, but I did. And he says, I voted for it because I thought it was important that that was the end of it. And it had passed. But George and I were always good friends. Oh, even today. We never had any problems with George Mitchell.
I think a lot of people were very happy that the first two choices for the Klada Award were Joe Brennan and Gerard Conley.
I think you got them in the wrong order. You think I'm kidding you? I'm talking about the St. Dominic's crowd.
So it had to be one from the west.
It didn't make any difference for me.
One from the west and one from the east?
No, St. Dominic's has always been, in my mind, the house of the Irish immigrants. Munjoy Hill, a lot of Irish settled up there, but the bulk, right there at St. Dominic's, that's what, you know, I always call St. Dominic's the mother church of the state, not the one, where's the original one? Up north someplace. But I always said St. Dominic's was, not the cathedral. This should have been the cathedral, St. Dominic.
Not St. Patrick's up in Newcastle, but St. Dominic's.
Yeah, St. Dominic, that's right. The one Newcastle was with, yeah, but I said, no, St. Dominic's was the, because that's where they all came. They all came here and located on the peninsula, and the bulk of them at St. Dom's.
See, it was difficult for me to get you back to St. Dominic's, but once you're there, you're a very loyal man. I think I'm finished with my questions with one exception. And I'd just like to ask you again, talking about the main Irish Heritage Center, the old St. Dominic's Church, what did it mean for you to be chosen to receive the Klada Award?
Well, it was an honor. It was an honor. I was extremely pleased to be considered. And I have that award sitting on my bureau, right in there. If you want to go look at it, yeah.
An Irish poet once said that the mark of a person, the mark of a man, he said, is when you can walk around your neighborhood and everyone knows you by your first name.
Yeah.
And that certainly is the case for both you and for Gerry Jr.
Well, more for Gerry Jr.
Well, for both of you, really.
Yeah.
Gerry, I appreciate your time very much today.
Oh, Michael, anytime.
Here's from Munjoy Hill to St. Dominic's.
Well, don't forget I was from Munjoy Hill before I was from St. Dominic's. It's good you found your way down there.
Connelly the long way?
No, the short way.
And Connelly the wrong way?
The right way.
And how do you spell Connelly, my name?
Well, I don't know how you spell it.
Yes, you
Double
do.
N, the way I have it is double N, double L, double cross.
We got that on tape now, finally. Gerry, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Kim, thank you very much. And Gerry Jr., thank
Yeah,
you.
it's great.
My pleasure.
All right.